I want to welcome you back to our walk through Romans. Today we're in Romans, the 13th chapter, verse number 3. Now, people have asked this question, what do you do when an authority says something that's not scriptural or says something against God? I remember many years ago, I was the academic dean in the first Bible school in the Soviet Union. One of the students one day asked me this question: what do you do when the government tells you you can't proclaim the gospel? And I said, you proclaim the gospel. Why? We need to keep this in mind. The authority that God ordains needs to also be in submission to God. He is the number one authority over all. In other words, if the authorities come to you and say abort your baby, you say, no, I'm not going to do it. If the authorities come to you and say you need to have a sex change, you say, no, I'm not going to do it. If the authorities come to you and tell you to break any of the commandments of God, you say, no, you need to submit to God. Do you understand? We could use this phrase, you go over their head and you go to the highest of authority, and that's how you live your life. I hope that you understand that. Verse number 3, chapter 13. For the rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do you do what is good, and you will have praise from the same? What's the Apostle Paul saying? The Apostle Paul is saying that rulers are there, and they're not there to cause fear for good behavior. If you have a ruler who is causing you fear for good behavior, you need to look at God and do what God says. Now, I've been blessed to be around persecuted Christians, where the government has said it's against the law to make a convert. You know what? That governing authority is causing fear for good behavior. How many of you know witnessing is good behavior? What do? You listen to God over the government. But the Apostle Paul says, for the rulers are not the cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. If you're doing something wrong, if you're doing something bad, the word evil can be translated as something bad, something that's worthless, something that's unprofitable for everybody. If you're doing something like that, you better be afraid. Why? Because that's the reason why God put authority there. He put authority there to keep people in line. And when authority stops keeping people in line, you know what happens? People begin to run around unrestrained. Then he goes on in verse number 3, and he says, do you want to have no fear of authority? Simple. Then do what is good, and you will have them praise from the same. The word praise here, it actually means the applaud, the approval. You know what? If you've got good authority, then you know what's going to happen when you're doing something good. They're going to approve of it. They're going to applaud it. Now, verse number 4. For it is a minister of God to you for good. What is a minister of God? God has placed authority in your life for good. This word good is a Greek word agathos, and it actually means something that's morally good, but we could also say it's there to make you profitable or fruitful. So what is Paul saying? He's saying that authority is there as a minister, as someone to serve you, as a minister to serve you that God has ordained, and he's doing it for good. But if you do what's evil, be afraid. Have you ever been driving down the road and you're going over the speed limit and you see that police officer sitting there with his little gun out? Not a pistol gun, but his little radar gun, and you're all of a sudden, well, that's good. Then he says, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. The word it is actually the pronoun he. He does not bear the sword for nothing. And he's talking here about a weapon of judgment. He does not bear the sword for nothing, for he is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. What is he? He is a minister of God. He is there to minister to us, to keep things in order, to keep things profitable, to keep things good for us. Now, verse number 5. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. Why should you be in subjection to authority? And again, let me remind you, I'm not talking about authority that tells you to disobey God's word or God's law. Why should you be in subjection to authority? First of all, so you don't have wrath. So that anger doesn't come upon you from those who are in authority. But then the next thing it says, for your conscience. Your conscience is very important to you. You know what? When authority doesn't do its job, you know what it's doing? It's ruining and hardening the conscience of people. It's not bringing justice. And you know what? The lack of justice causes people's hearts to become hard. Let me just say this, and we're going to close today. I believe that in this last days, the Bible tells us that there's a hardness of heart. And I believe one of the reasons there's a hardness of heart or a hardness of conscience is because of lack of proper authority. Thank you for watching us today. Join us again tomorrow as we continue our study of the book of Romans.